Rachel from the Straits Times. We've heard a lot about how the candidates this year are going to be the core of the 4G leadership. And Singapore's at a stage of its development where we are looking to the government for new ideas, new direction that the country will take as it becomes a mature economy. Can I ask the candidates, which PAP policy do you disagree with or want to see changed, and why?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. On principles, I cannot say I disagree with the policies of the PAP, the government. It's always about being connected to the world, financial, fiscal sustainability, making sure people are self-reliant. All these are very sound principles. If I disagree with them, I will not be sitting here. So, by and large, I think the policies are sound. What I think we may sometimes disagree with or have different views with is in its implementation. Implementation is important. Implementation is strategy. But when it comes to implementation, we have to know the policy very well, know the execution very well. And so, if you ask me what policy I disagree with, I think it will require me to understand those policies deeply. I'll give you an example. When it comes to training adults, you can't disagree that you've got to train adults so that adult workers so that they can keep up with the changes in the economy. But when I go to WDA, we look at the execution. Yes, it's been done. It's a good policy, but majority of the funding and the effort were channeled towards employers to train their workers. So I start to ask myself, you want real benefit for real people, you got to reach out to those people with no employers or with employers not wanting to support them. So there was a big shift in execution when I was in WDA. So I'm a person who like to drill into nuts and bolts. So I'm sure if I ever have the chance to work on any other policy, I would drill into nuts and bolts. And I'm sure I'll have my disagreement with the execution.
Desmond, maybe you want to have a go?
On the front, I agree with what Yi Gang has said. Good policies are adaptive. Good policies evolved. A lot of times, what we mistake for a bad policy is usually its implementation, practice versus usage. Now, why a particular area that of implementation problems I always had was how do we reach out to the underprivileged? Say the area which I'm serving now, which is Hougang. We have a lot of older folks, many of them not literate. Many of them probably they don't read much, even if they are schooled. And to a lot of them, when I visited them in their house, I found them that, oh, hey, you told me you got problems with transport, and you had problems paying medical bills. But have you heard about these schemes that we had? And then the auntie told me, 这是什么来的？这你从来没听过诶。So, but does it mean that the schemes weren't there and that the funds wasn't there available for them to use? It was. And we publicized it on website, flyers and stuff, but somehow it's not reaching out to them. So, ground effectiveness of that policy was somewhere there was a gap. So we solved that and we say that now, things got to change. Having things on just website and flyers may not work. Not only do we go house to house to visit, we identify key people within the blocks, the aunties who, some aunties tend to speak a lot, right? They go around the place. And we tell them and brief them and say that, hey, we have this. Can you help me identify those who are in need? And from there, we see real results. So this is an example of how we see that implementation-wise, it may not be fulfilling what the policy intends it to be. Thank you.
Daniel?
So, Rachel, I'll give you two examples. I think I agree with both my colleagues that in general, it's the policy is something I agree with. It's about implementation. But let me just give you two examples of where perhaps, as DPM has mentioned, the broad base of dissent is accepted and discussed within the party. So one's a relatively minor example, building on the comments that I made at the party convention a couple of years ago. I would love to be able to take my folding bicycle on public transport all day long. But that's self-interest. That's something that I would like. That doesn't necessarily mean that the policy needs to be changed, because there are implications and consequences. Until we have enough people who that policy would serve, perhaps the status quo is the right thing to have. Something a bit more profound, in my line of work, I come across a lot of single moms. I think in general I agree with the policies, but I think most of these women are trying to lead very difficult lives with some degree of dignity. And I think we could do a little bit better to help them lead those lives. Again, the consequences and the implications of any change could be significant, and those would need to be studied before we do anything. But those are two examples where I think we could do better.
Hi, Li Kiang from Lianhe Zaobao. Mr. Low Tia Kiang, during his walkabout yesterday, has challenged PAP perhaps to send your potential Prime Minister candidates to SMC for contest. Are there plans for any of the new candidates to be sent to SMC to contest on their own?
Well, we decide on our own strategy. We don't respond to Mr. Low Tia Kiang. Shane?
The three candidates, all of you, when asked what you want to change, you spoke mainly of the need to ensure that implementation is done correctly, that it's effective and it reaches out to the people that's needed. But moving into a sort of brave new world of governance, what new perspectives or new ideas do you bring to the table? Or is it really about just tinkering at the edges?
Who wants to have a go? Tara?
Well, I think we all have our perspectives and sort of maybe burning desires, but I think from my perspective, the first thing is that it's not about what we want. I mean, our job as candidates is to represent what our residents and the constituents and the citizens want. So it is about bringing a new perspective for solutions to their needs, not necessarily about what we want to implement. But there are things that we're all passionate about, and I'll give you one example where I think I would be happy to offer up solutions and suggestions, and that would be education policy. On the background of the work that I've done in education, I think some of those new methodologies could radically and significantly impact all types of education in Singapore. And I think given our very effective education system and oversight, we're in a position where we could make those changes and leverage and get a lot of results out of them.
Desmond, you want to have a go?
When you talk about Brave New Front, actually there's something that I think our government has always been doing. But we do whatever that is needed and whatever that is practical and whatever that is needed to improve the lot of the residents. You just look at the examples of, say, the IRs. There was a sacred cow back then, but we changed that. We adapted. It was essential for us to transform our society in something different. I think that for me as well is something that I believe a lot in, that our government is a bold government. We dare to go where no one dares to go before. Now, for me personally, it's not really self-interest, but I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids and stuff. So I talk to a lot of young residents, right? And they say that, hey, you know what? Being a young family is really tough now. I said, why? We got to go to work. I could have kids. Who's going to take care of my kids back home? Do we have quality preschool care? If I have a choice, that is something that I'll work on to make sure the quality preschool care is available, and the quality preschool care is especially available to the underprivileged, because that really gets them up on the education chain, and that really levels them up as a progress in society. But that's it. We have moved on those fronts. During the last budget, we have money allocated for those. But to make sure that it's available for everyone, that would be my goal. Is that a brave new front? Well, if it's needed and it's appreciated and people benefit from it, then I think that is a brave new front. Thank you.
Other questions?
Sorry. In a brave new world, you have to be adaptive, you have to be innovative, but you don't throw your foundation stones away. So that's what I believe. And I think our foundation stones, laid by the PAP government, are strong, and let's not throw them away. So we shouldn't call that tinkering at the edges. When what I did and what my team and I did in WDA wasn't tinkering at the edges, we kept to the principles, kept to the foundation stones, but a major shift in implementation strategy. So I think moving forward, that's the perspective that I think I have. If I'm expected to say, let's move to a welfare state, I think that's against my principles. Let's move to minimum wage, that's against my principles. I think if we want to do more, there are other ideas in terms of upgrading our workforce and doing more. In terms of getting in FDI, We used to bring in the investments, but let's try also to bring in not just the investment, but the training facilities, as we have done for Rolls-Royce. When we have productivity incentives, let's see how productivity incentives can be tied to better HR practices, so that when you raise productivity, as the labour movement always say, raise it, measure it, and share it with workers. I think more can be done on that front. And in terms of foreign workers, we are getting more and more tight with the influx of foreign workers. But at the same time, we have to have more flexibility to recognize the real value, the real skills level of foreign workers. Sometimes they come into a company, they can undergo quite immense in-house training to the extent that they are very valuable to the employer. Is there a more flexible way to gauge that level of skills rather than go by their academic qualifications? So the list can go on. I think there are lots of implementations, details and strategies that if you implement them, it will add up to a major shift in policy.